We're discussing freedom of speech and other issues in our world challenges roundtable today. And with us, former Attorney General Edwin Meese, and we have First Amendment rights advocate Edward Lawson with us, and also feminist author Barbara Ehrenreich. I think we'll go to the phones and get some input from our audience now, if we may, folks. Let's go to David in Illinois. Hello, David.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, thank you.
I have a question for the panelists. Every time the news media seems to put forth the First Amendment, they fail to recognize a very important part of the First Amendment, and that's the free exercise of religion. And it seems that every time an evangelical starts to speak up politically, they're often muzzled by those who claim freedom of speech, as if separation in church and state, they can't mix the two.
Barbara, comment about that?
Well, I don't think that's what has muzzled some of our evangelicists. I think some of them have fallen into their own traps. I'm thinking of Jimmy Swaggart. I don't think this has been a big problem. There is a tremendous freedom here to speak out from your religious point of view. In the 80s, I think we went to an excess where it was felt that if you didn't have a religious point of view, if you were a secularist, that wasn't a good idea. So I don't understand what the caller is referring to.
Okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'd have to join her in saying I don't understand what the caller is talking about, or if he's from this planet. I would remind him that probably the largest concentration of television and radio stations outside of the three major networks is owned by churches. There is not at this moment anywhere in the country that you could not find tons and tons of radio and television programs plus printed material that is published by these evangelicals. I don't understand what he's talking about.
Well, I think perhaps I know what the caller's talking about. I think he's looking at the disproportionate amount of space given to the foibles of the Jimmy Bakkers and the Jimmy Swaggarts, and much less attention by the news media being given to religion in general in the country. And that certainly is the case.
Well, but that's not censorship. I'm saying the freedom of press and the freedom from religious intervention would be clearly obstructed if we had some government agency telling NBC, CBS, or ABC what religion they should cover or how they should cover it. I think what we as Americans do, and what this gentleman who's calling us can do, if he doesn't feel that the positive points of the evangelicals are put out, he is free to either start his own publication or start his own television station.
Well, I think that's certainly true, although it is surprising how many cases where zoning laws and all kinds of other laws are being used to impede religions which are not applied to other types of organizations. But this is a big subject and probably longer than we have time to talk about in this program.
Fine,
But
and
at the
let's go to,
counterbalance,
if we may,
there's also
if,
tax
Mr. Lawson,
exemptions for religion.
If we may, let's go to Puerto Rico and say hello to Kay. Hello, Kay. Welcome.
Hello, Sonya.
Yes.
I love your program. I wanted to say something to Mr. Lawson. As you probably can recognize, I come from England, and we have exactly the same problem in England that I can see and that he mentions. That is, our industry has been ripped out from England to leave good working men walking around with their hands in their pockets, to plant it in places like Hong Kong, Singapore, you name it, you know it, where they work for virtually nothing, where we have the real sweated labor of yesterday's New York, and our men are left without jobs. This is a Maggie Thatcher syndrome. It applies to the Reagan syndrome, and I don't know who can deny it, because it's staring us in our faces in England.
Now, Mr. Lawson, I gather that you agree with that. What can we do to change it?
Well, I think that we can do two things. I think one is to understand the implications of what she's saying. The same thing that's happening in England is happening here. That is to say, our jobs are being sold overseas. They are being sold into environments where there is no job safety, where there's no minimum wage, where there are no ecological restraints placed on industry. What we can do without involving the government at all is to understand that any labor union from this day forth that exercises the utter stupidity in talking about striking for higher wages is doing so at the expense of talking about much more progressive things like doubling whatever the union wages are, so the union can start to build its own war chest to buy the very companies that they are working for, and by so doing be able to ensure that those companies and the jobs, not the wages, the jobs stay here in the United States.
Okay, we're gonna move on, if we may. Let's go to California and Carrie. Hello, Carrie.
Hi, Sonya. I watch your show every day religiously, and I just want to congratulate you on doing a great job. And this question is directed towards Ed Meese. Mr. Meese, you were a very fond member of the Reagan administration, and here we are talking about jobs and everything, and the middle class, And basically, Mr. Meese, my question is this. How can you, as ex-Attorney General and a very close member of Ronald Reagan, sit here on this TV show and say the economy is going good when we have a $300 billion deficit?
And I'm sure if we had an opportunity, we can discuss the S&L situation and a lot of what we have heard about the homeless on the street and people not being able to make a living and go on with their lives.
Well, what I'm talking about is the growth in the economy and the progress that was made during the Reagan years. Remember, we took over from Jimmy Carter at a time when the economy was in absolute shambles, absolute chaos. We had inflation at the rate of 12% a year. We had interest rates over 21%. Nobody could buy a home. We had unemployment 7.5% and climbing. Today, all of that has been reversed. Sure, we have problems in the economy, and we always will.
I don't think Barbara agrees with you, Mr. Meese. Forgive me, but I would like to have her response to that.
Well, but let me finish, though, please, about this whole matter. I think the reason we have a deficit today is because the federal government is spending too much.
Well, it's true, the federal government has spent too much, and one of the things it spent so much on in the 80s was on the biggest peacetime military buildup that we ever had.
But that's what won the Persian Gulf War.
Well,
you certainly wouldn't want to have lost that war, would you?
No, but I never had any doubt that we were going to win a war against a much smaller country. But I think that we built up a defense, a huge amount, an arsenal way beyond what we needed, because then the Cold War ended.
But
so that's one
but it ended because we built up the arsenal.
Please, Mr. Meese, you're not Attorney General anymore. Yeah. I get to talk now. No, but I think that we're now, and with all due respect, Mr. Meese, we are now in a recession with unemployment climbing back up again. Inflation has been edging back up, and what makes this really scary is the debt situation now. This isn't 1980 anymore. Sonya mentioned the S&L crisis with a potential $1 trillion price tag on that. So that's what makes the whole thing really scary. I don't think it's unusual or exotic to say that America really went, the wealthy, I should say, in America were very irresponsible in the 80s, and that we are going to be left with those debts and left with those problems for generations.
We're going to have our audience join us again, and one of the topics I want to ask you about, and before the media is accused of becoming alarmist, with the new population proportions that we are seeing, in an age of nationalism, a recession, a loss of jobs, are we on the brink of a variety of discriminations that we really haven't seen for a long time? I'm going to ask each of you that. 212-643-0077. Come and join us.